Well, yes, I think we have to look in holistic terms and, start coming from the big picture and not expect one little section to solve all the problems. So I appreciate your answer and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We did say on that how much to include and how much not to. But the movie was obviously part of why it took 8 years, was to mostly get rid of stuff that we were trying, to figure out whether or not to include. But anyway, by using the sector navigator and thinking holistically, part of what that did is we said, the thing about free energy is that it's not just a technology, it's a paradigm. Because when you realize that the universe is abundant, that shifts not just the potential for our technology, but for how we relate to one another. Because the whole scarcity paradigm that if you have it, I won't, and if I have it, you can't, goes away when you realize that we're all connected and it's an infinitely abundant universe. So part of our choice in choosing to include that was that it had such broad ramifications, and also because one of the ways that I believe the agenda has been able to get so far is to keep people so disempowered and so focused on survival that they don't have time to do the level of inquiry or even creative problem solving that they could otherwise. And often energy access is a bottleneck to that kind of time. So that was it, but it was in no way meant to supplant the importance of consciousness or ecology, or, like you say, any of these other things that need to work in tandem with the free energy.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Uranus. Shifting to a different area, economics and governance are tightly interwoven into the elite's control grid. I have a question for you in this area. Post-Thrive movie release, in both the Worldwide Tipping Point interview as well as in your interview with Catherine Austin Fitz on Solari, the money factor was brought into your conversation, but not in any great depth. Given that Catherine is a money-oriented person, I thought it was kind of strange that it didn't naturally flow out of that. In the Solari interview, you did state, at the core of the whole scam is the central banking system and fractional reserve scam. As Amschel Meyer Rothschild is quoted to have said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." And similarly, President James Garfield is quoted as also having said, "Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is the absolute master of all industry and commerce." The money cartel and central banks, and the BIS/IMF as central banks to the central banks, appear to me at least to be the linchpin of power and control. Since the politicians of the indistinguishable red team, blue team are dependent on the primary dealer banks, and that the central banks integrate in that in order to fund government operations, why would a politician ever vote or move to dismember or end the Fed or nationalize it and then shift those functions over inside the Treasury or to the comptroller of the currency? How do we change and fix the money paradigm?
Well, I think it's a great question about what politicians would vote for. It would take a tremendous level of both understanding and integrity. In the case of somebody like Ron Paul, you've seen it for 30 years. Dennis Kucinich has caught on more recently. He's had the integrity but not the understanding until recently, I believe, and now he's spoken out about in favor of ending the Fed. But most of the politicians either don't understand the system. I've known a number of senators and congresspeople myself, and I have been shocked at their lack of understanding of economics, of the and of a true liberty system. But the how to actually change that system, I think that the key is at the root of it. It's based on something which is not aligned with truth or with natural principles, which is that a few individuals are separated from other human beings and given a power that other human beings don't have. And from that builds a cancerous system. And the powers that they're given are, one, the power to tax, and two, the power to create money whenever they want. In the case of the government, the first time, and the central bankers the second time. And then finally, back to the government, they're given a monopoly on force. And that's the dangerous combination. When a small group of people gets to set the rules, make up money, and then have the strongest force around, they can basically do whatever they want to other people as long as they can do it gradually enough that they're not overthrown by a revolution. And so the key, I think, is not to create a violent revolution, because they have most of the money and virtually all the military force at this point, but to have a decentralized movement, like I described before, of withdrawing our participation from each of those systems, from the income tax system, from the willingness to have a private central bank telling everybody else how much money is going to be in the system, and also from having a small group of people having the only organized force. And the key to me in the whole transition is, in a single word, it's voluntary. That's my kind of true north. Well, that's the compass I hold up to a system. And you look at our Federal Reserve System, the fractional reserve system, and you think, okay, is this system voluntary? No, you actually have to use Federal Reserve notes, and you have to go along with what the Federal Reserve says the interest rates are going to be, and you have to pay income tax that someone else decides, whether you like it or not, under threat of violence. So imagine if the entire system was voluntary. If you had anybody could make up any currency they want. Some currencies are actually backed by solid commodities or minerals or whatever, and you can be guaranteed of exchanging your notes for that anytime you want. And then you have another currency down the street that you can also use that is backed by nothing. Which currency are you going to use? How long is that one down the street that somebody just made up? It's not going to last, except in a system where the state is dominating everyone else by that monopoly on force. So suppose, rather than having any centralized monopoly on force, you had private security companies that would have to be insured by private insurance companies that would have to keep evaluating what is the reputation of this security company for not violating anybody's rights, but instead protecting them. That's the world that we're heading toward, and it's not a way that people are used to thinking at all. But to get to the root of the problem, to me, it's going back into the money and back into the system of governance and saying, okay, if we're going to agree not to violate anybody, then let's make sure that every single system is voluntary. As long as nobody is violating someone else's person or property or privacy, then people are free to do what they want. They're free to exchange as they want. They're free to hire the protection they want, but not to violate someone else simply to protect their own rights.
And if we can get some honest politicians in, we might be able to evolve to an honest money system. They really do have quite a control grid set up. And speaking of the intricate control grid and domination agenda that won't be dismantled overnight, Uranus Rising has a question on timing, what to do, and when.
Foster, in the movie and on your website, you have put forward the suggestion of a 3-phased overlapping plan of solutions. As you said in the film, you can't build a just system on top of an unjust one. It seems to me that we would need a period of time for people to become informed, to awaken to all that you have put forward in the film, to the necessary critical mass, but also implement these phases. These are very noble visions and goals, and I would think these would appeal to most people. But there are other people who feel a profound urgency is upon us now, especially with the financial and market woes in the U.S. and around the world, severe weather and terrestrial events, peak oil, and more. My questions are, what time frame do you see for this movement to gain traction and be fulfilled? What kind of time frame do you expect for the solutions to be implemented? Do we have time? And if we don't, what?
Well, I have a tremendous confidence in the life force itself. And I see the planetary immune system kicking in. I see people accessing their creativity and organizing synergistically in ways that even I hadn't been able to imagine. I see things moving more rapidly than I had even estimated that they could. So I'm not Pollyannish about the transition, and at the same time, I'm feeling very confident that the old system really is sloughing off like an exoskeleton. Often it's like an egg crack. We're just growing beyond it, and I'm doing everything I can, as is Kimberly, to make that transition as comfortable and nonviolent as possible. And I am so encouraged by things that I had kind of asked the universe for in my deeper moments, but I wasn't necessarily expecting or so quickly. And two examples of that are Occupy and Anonymous. We've got a section in our film and on the website where we talk about the importance of critical mass action. And that's a particular strategy where people sign up for a movement, and then the action happens when there's a critical mass ready to go. Now, that strategy wasn't part of Occupy. That was just masses of people coming together. But it's shown me, even more than I knew before, how rapidly an idea whose time has come can spread in people's lives and show up in action. And then my main concern after that was, can we keep the Internet open long enough to use it as the tool that's needed to cross this tipping point? And then Occupy shows up. And I remember sitting at my desk when somebody sent me the trailer for when Occupy actually came out. Anonymous came out vocally. And I watched that trailer, and I just cried at my desk with just happiness, because I had hoped that there would be an independent, decentralized network of brilliant computer whizzes who would protect the Internet and protect the truth getting told around the world. And then Anonymous shows up. And, by the way, they have contacted us through other people and let us know that they love our project and have our back, which feels good, because that's not my specialty. And with the Internet open, I'm tremendously confident. So I'm going to, I usually don't get into predictions much, but I was really intrigued by your question to think about, okay, well, what sort of patterns of unfoldment of time can I imagine? So it'll be interesting to check back on this in a few years and see. But my assumptions are based on that we keep the Internet open. So when I look at, okay, what kind of time is it going to take, one vision that I've had is 2 presidential terms for the movement into stage 1 and then stage 2. And I'm not backing any particular candidate, but as a symbol of this kind of metaphor, I've been envisioning a political ticket made up of Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich. So you've got the traditional Democrat Republicans represented, but both people are very brilliant, very knowledgeable, and have tremendous integrity.